宮下、恵美、8歳、日野市、五徳坊付近の草むらにて遺体発見。死後約1週間経過。全身重力。
Revenge is one of the oldest storytelling devices. It has been an essential element for some of the most iconic pieces of fiction. From novels like The Count of Monte Cristo to Korean cinema, something speaks to us in stories of revenge. And since I already brought it up, something about Eastern interpretations really intrigues me. Old Boy is considered to be one of the greatest films of the 21st century, and also one of the most disturbing. A personal favorite of mine as well is 2010's I Saw the Devil. But I don't want to be the millionth person to speak about Korean revenge films. Today we're jumping over to Japan to discuss one of its most interesting filmmakers, Kiyoshi Kurosawa. If you aren't familiar, Kiyoshi Kurosawa is one of Japan's leading directors in horror and thrillers, most notably known, at least in the West, for his films Cure and Pulse. And after recently rewatching both of these films, I decided to go on a deep dive with his filmography. And in the process, I discovered a haunting tale of revenge, a film that walks the line of comedy, drama, and absolute horror. And I want to share that film with all of you. I'm Nightmare Movies, and today I want to take a look at Kiyoshi Kurosawa's underrated gem, 1998's Serpent's Path. The film starts by immediately introducing us to our two protagonists, Nijima and Miyashita. For now, they're driving down the road towards an unknown destination. They stop at a payphone, and Miyashita grabs a camcorder from the back of the car. He plays a video of his daughter and says, "It won't be long now." Immediately, you can probably guess what is going on and where they might be headed to. Nijima picks up the phone to call someone named Atsuki. The man, I assume, had something to do with Miyashita's daughter. He pretends that he's a delivery driver coming to drop off a package, but unfortunately he is unable to read the address on the package. Atsuki gives them his address, and with that, we head off to get some answers. The two arrive at Atsuki's home, where we hear a piano recital going on. They knock on the door, and as Atsuki opens it, Nijima clumsily tackles him to the ground. Miyashita comes to help and tases Atsuki, knocking him unconscious, and then they carry him back to their car and throw him in the trunk. But something you might notice is behind them on a balcony, a woman stands there, witnessing the entire crime happening. Keep this in mind because I'll be bringing it up later. Nijima and Miyashita drive back to where we will be spending a good amount of this film, an abandoned factory. They take Atsuki out of the trunk, and I'm not sure why, but they untie his legs and this happens. After catching him, Nijima and Miyashita chain him to the wall, and Nijima leaves Miyashita to his business. Miyashita rolls out this old CRT in front of Atsuki. He turns it on and plays the same video that he was watching on his camcorder, the last video he has of his daughter. What happens next is, honestly, unsettling. Miyashita coldly delivers to Atsuki the police report of what he did to Miyashita's daughter, and what he did was beyond evil. Mutilating the body after death to the point where this girl was unrecognizable and doing even more unspeakable things that YouTube really wouldn't love for me to say. Miyashita interrogates Atsuki, trying to force a confession out of him, but Atsuki denies doing anything. Frustrated, Miyashita sprints back to the table, grabs the gun, but just before he can end this, Nijima stops him. That would be too easy of a death for this man. So Nijima tells Atsuki that this building is soundproofed, so he can scream all he wants, but no one is coming. And with that, Nijima has to leave, and this is where we discover a little bit more about who Nijima is. He rides his bike to a random building, and after entering, it turns out to be a classroom. Though never overtly explained, I assume Nijima is some sort of science professor specifically. He walks up to his chalkboard and writes down an equation for his students to solve. He tells one of his students to solve it, and as we wait, Nijima introduces us to someone who doesn't quite fit in there, a young girl. Nijima's student fails to solve the equation, and he tells him that the way that space turns inside out and time flows backwards, the world will just fall apart. He's not God. Another important idea to keep in mind. Next, he asks to, quote, combine this with duality, and the little girl raises her hand to solve. She easily solves it, impressing Nijima before we cut back to our captive. Atsuki is begging to use the bathroom, shifting between violent threats to proclaiming his innocence, all while Miyashita sits in the other room, laughing at his suffering. Nijima arrives and cleans the man after the mess that he's made. He coldly hoses the man down and Miyashita jogs over to laugh at Atsuki. Something that I want to point out is the difference in how these two men are handling this situation. Nijima has been cold and calculated this entire time, while Miyashita seems to just be reveling in the suffering. He laughs the entire time as Atsuki is being hosed down, but Nijima doesn't seem to get any catharsis from this, and I'm honestly confused why he's even here, but I digress. The torment continues and Nijima brings Atsuki some food. He drops it on the ground, forcing him to eat off the dirty warehouse floor. Miyashita rolls the CRT back over and once again recites the disturbing details of his daughter's death. As he does, Nijima spins the barrel of a revolver before we flash back to 1 year earlier, the time where Nijima and Miyashita first met. Nijima is outside, drawing complex equations on the brick sidewalk with his young prodigy student. Miyashita introduces himself and gives Nijima this cold glare before we flash forward to the present. As the two play darts together, Atsuki calls out to them. Miyashita sticks his head out the window to see what he wants, and this is where the first twist in our story starts. Atsuki asks if he knows a man named Hiyama. Miyashita sprints downstairs to talk to him. Atsuki claims that Hiyama was the one who killed his daughter, not him. Atsuki says that Miyashita was going to sell Hiyama out, so he went after Miyashita, but Atsuki didn't know that he would go after his daughter. Nijima pulls Miyashita aside and asks for an explanation. This is where we learn that Miyashita was a part of a gang, specifically the Yakuza. Miyashita was trying to get out of it but wasn't able to. He says that he can explain everything, but Nijima replies that explanations don't matter. It won't bring her back. So the two go back and forth about what they're gonna do, eventually deciding on the idea that they are going to find out the truth. They are going to kidnap this man, Hiyama, and find out if he was actually responsible for the death of Miyashita's daughter. In an attempt to prove his innocence, Atsuki tells them that Hiyama is a golfer, and that's where they are most likely to be able to kidnap him. So with that, we're off to the golf courses. After hitting a ball into the forest, Hiyama goes to find it, and that's where the men are waiting to make their move. And for some reason, they put him in a body bag, maybe to be able to move him easier, but this honestly turns into an extremely wacky scene. After one of Hiyama's guards attempts to kill the men, they run off, dragging Hiyama's unconscious body down this ridiculously large hill, all while the other henchmen fire shots at them. Luckily, the men are able to get away in an extremely goofy way and bring Hiyama back to the warehouse. Miyashita rolls the TV out once again and begins his interrogation, but it seems that there was some sort of miscommunication going on. Hiyama didn't kill his daughter, even asking why he would when Miyashita was such a good worker for him. So with that, we're no closer to any answers, and now they have an extra hostage to deal with. Not only that, but they have a group of Yakuza who are going to be looking for revenge as well. Shifting perspectives once again, Nijima is back teaching his classes, and the young girl offers to help him solve more problems at the chalkboard. Students gather around, amazed at the two of them. However, once class is dismissed, Nijima walks outside and feels like someone is watching him. He's paranoid now, the first time he's shown any sign of fear in this situation, and it's time to make a decision. He heads back to the warehouse to cut a deal with the two captives. Nijima says that he doesn't care about who killed the girl, he just wants to be done with this. If the two of them can come up with a person to blame, he can take them to a secondary location and set them free, with the stipulation that the two men don't harm Nijima. They get their story straight and we fast forward to the morning. The two men explained to Miyashita that they put a hit out on him and hired a man named Araga to take him out. But the man was psychotic and went after Miyashita's daughter instead. They say that they are deeply sorry about it and will make it up any way they can, mainly by taking him to Araga. Nijima says that it's time to settle this and removes the men's arm restraints, but only the arm restraints. He walks away and the men are confused, and that's when Nijima takes out the revolver, loads one round into it, and says that they get to decide which one of them takes the men to Araga. He throws the revolver between them and walks away. Hiyama directs the men to an abandoned field, a fake address. Still believing that this is part of their original plan, he tells Nijima that he's innocent and that he didn't do it, but Nijima doesn't have anything to say. So with no other options, Hiyama makes a run for it. However, Miyashita turns and fires a shot at Hiyama. Slowly, he walks up to Hiyama and coldly takes his life in broad daylight. With no leads anymore, it's up to Miyashita and Nijima to track down Ariga and hopefully end this for good. Eventually, they track Ariga to a Yakuza house where Nijima finds him being waterboarded in the bathroom. And in a strange turn, Nijima tells Ariga to lie about who he is, otherwise he'll be killed. So, he does. Ariga tells Miyashita that he's not Ariga, but he knows where to find him. Miyashita and Nijima take him back to the warehouse, and Miyashita is trying to force him to say where Ariga is, but he's getting nowhere, and Nijima has to return to his job. That night, however, Miyashita visits Nijima at work. He sits and watches Nijima work, before being escorted out into the hallway. Miyashita says that the man will tell them where Ariga is, but only if he talks to Nijima. Makes sense considering he saved Ariga's life. Nijima says that he will, and in the morning, he gives Ariga an ultimatum. The two of them still have a group of Yakuza hunting them down, so Nijima wants Ariga to lure them out so he can finish them off. And with that, we enter the climax of the film. Miyashita and Nijima set up their ambush at a second abandoned factory, but as they enter, Miyashita is shown something truly unnerving. We see two cameras on tripods facing a chair with restraints. In between the cameras is a wooden table with tools scattered across it. Miyashita approaches it, and this is where we get the most depressing reveal. Miyashita asks if this is where they filmed Nijima's daughter too. Now we understand, just like Miyashita, Nijima's daughter was killed by these people. What we didn't know, however, is that they filmed the brutal acts they inflicted on these girls, presumably to make money off of it. And now we know why Nijima is helping Miyashita. They both want their revenge, and they're going to get it. Systematically, they take out each of the Yakuza members one by one, until none of them are left. An almost anti-climax in my opinion, but the film doesn't end there, because there's one more person to be taken care of. You remember earlier when Atsuki explained that all of this happened because Miyashita was going to sell out his boss? Well, what was he going to sell his boss out for? Nijima takes Miyashita back to the original warehouse and confronts him. He says that Miyashita and them were all in the same business, an absolutely horrifying one. Miyashita tells Nijima that he was just in sales. He didn't actually know what was on the tapes, but Nijima isn't satisfied with that, so he decides to show Miyashita what was on those tapes. He rolls over the TV for one final time, and Miyashita sits and watches what we can only assume is the most disturbing video we can ever imagine, and that is Serpent's Path. Unlike typical films that aim to deconstruct revenge, Serpent's Path asks a unique question. What is innocence? Throughout the entire film, we never get a direct answer as to who killed these girls. The men they kidnapped could be lying about not knowing, or honestly have no clue that the crime even took place. There isn't a single person we can pin this on, and that's the point. We have two ideas that are presented. We have Nijima's point of view, that even if none of them are directly involved, they at the very least played a part in what happened. Even down to the level where Miyashita was at, where he was distributing tapes that he was unaware of the contents of, meaning that no one was innocent in this crime, which in this specific case I can definitely agree with, but this film also challenges that viewpoint in little ways. Remember that woman on the balcony from the beginning of the film? She was a witness to this crime and presumably did nothing about it. Taking Nijima's philosophy, she would be just as guilty as them for all the people that they had killed, which obviously is a little hyperbolic to claim she would be, but that's the point. Where is the exact line of innocence drawn, and who decides it? Earlier in the film, Nijima tells one of his students that the way that space turns inside out and time flows backwards, the world will fall apart. He's not God. Applying that to this movie, who gets to decide who's innocent and who's not? Because if it was just up to each individual, the world would be chaos. Someone somewhere can always find a justification for their actions. Now, Serpent's Path creates a deceivingly simple answer to that question. We can all agree that there are objectively bad men in this scenario, and in my opinion, they're dealt with in an acceptable way. But one other interesting angle this movie views revenge at is how it can go too far, but not not in your typical revenge is bad sort of way. See, throughout the film, the young girl in Nijima's class is seen in close proximity to the Yakuza members that are actively hunting him. She walks by them in the street and luckily isn't taken. One of them approaches her and hands her a missing persons poster, telling her to contact them if she sees Hiyama. But that's not all. Miyashita is clearly an unstable individual. He's the one torturing these men for the most part, and at the beginning of the film, he almost kills off the very first person they kidnap just because he got upset. He's someone who is willing to kill at the drop of a hat, and was also at the very least a part of this horrible operation, and Nijima still continues to work with him. Looking at it through that lens, when Miyashita visits Nijima in his classroom, who knows if that young girl was also in danger or not? She's seen leaving the building, and Miyashita follows her outside, smiling at her in that same way he does before he tries to hurt somebody. Maybe Miyashita had a much darker role in this operation and lied like everyone else. But even disregarding that theory, the potentially right thing to have done in this situation was to take the tapes Nijima had at his disposal and get everyone involved arrested. There were multiple points in this film where this girl was in danger directly because Nijima wanted to take revenge and play God in his own way. Luckily, nothing ever happened, but Kurosawa only wanted to plant that thought in our heads. Ambiguity is this film's greatest strength, and to be honest, I appreciate a movie that subverts the ideas of revenge in a unique way. These men, in my opinion, deserved what happened to them. Sometimes revenge is a valid choice, but where do we draw the line? When do people stop being responsible? And what do you think? I'd love to know everyone's thoughts on this one, because I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. It's a movie with a lot of things to uncover and talk about, so leave a comment if you want to discuss it. And with all that being said, thanks for watching. I'm Nightmare Movies, and I'll see you guys next time.